Namo Buddhaya. Good morning. Welcome to the Buddha Dhamma TV. My name is Lisa Chu. Today we begin our program with a sermon given by Dr. Chandana of the United States. His sermon is on Samaditi Sutta, the discourse on right view. This is the second part of the sermon. Here is Venerable Dr. Bhante Chandana.
What is the knife? Wisdom. Dig through the anthill. You're going to see a lot of things come up. And now we are digging. And we see passion or lust, raga. He removes the underlying drive for having dislike or resistance, patigha. And he completely uproots from his heart the underlying drive for bearing the conceit, I am. Asmimana. That conceit is and has been and is going to continue to be the death and destruction of many a meditator in this path, on this path. Conceit. So many people will leave this body despite the fact that they have come to the Dhamma. Why? Because the hold that conceit has on the heart is so tremendous. Their trust and faith in the asmimana is far greater than the trust and faith and confidence in the Dhamma. Dhamma is not something out there that's faceless, this and that. And yeah, I worship the Dhamma, or I pay refuge, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I pay respect to the Dhamma. It's not like that. When push comes to shove and you are living through a difficult moment in your life, decisions have to be made. Are you choosing kusala or akusala? Are you choosing the Dhamma or adhamma? When you are not choosing what is Dhamma, you are choosing asmimana, meaning you are choosing adhamma. Now that can take any kind of coloration you want. But basically, whatever comes natural, that's another thing that people use. Habitually, that's what you're used to. Well, habitually, you're used to the kilesas, period. Not wisdom. That's not your habit. Wisdom is not, it doesn't come naturally. You have to work to get wisdom. Ignorance works naturally. Conceit works naturally. Mara works naturally. Underline, quotation marks, naturally. Why? Because they're easy. They're easy. When you're sitting to meditate, what is more difficult to do? To sit or to get up any moment? You have a tiny little scratch, an itch, a pain, a tiny little something. Oh, there's a sound. Oh, it's coming from the kitchen. What is that? Oh, maybe that's a mouth. Let me get up. It's the first thing that gets to be sacrificed. You're sit. You're calm. You're tranquil. That's the first thing that is thrown out into the traffic. Out the window. It is harder, however, to sit through that. Why? Because you're going against Mara. You're going against conceit. That's why many people cannot become students these days. True students of the Dhamma require us to be humble. How many humble people do you know? Those are, if you find them, those are the ones who have the necessary requisite to be a student of the Dhamma. But we are ensuring that we never get to that moment of or place of humility. So we are locking ourselves out of being true students of the Dhamma. So we add more and more nonsense. Data, nonsense data about the Dhamma. And continue to fester in the cesspit of our ignorance. And there goes another life. Next one, you're going to probably be, if you're lucky, a four-legged animal somewhere. If you're lucky. Thus, by leaving behind ignorance and gaining true knowledge within himself, he puts an end to suffering here, within this very life of his. It is in this manner, friends, that a noble disciple is said to possess right view, the one whose view is unmistakably accurate, someone who has in his heart the unshakable and personally verifiable faith and confidence in the Dhamma, the one who has finally attained to the true and genuine Dhamma. In listening to these words spoken by the Venerable Sariputta, the fellow bhikkhus became quite delighted as they exclaimed, "Sadhu, friend." Now we get to the Four Noble Truths directly. So this section is headed by, the heading is Understanding the Four Noble Truths. Excuse me. Then the bhikkhus proceeded to ask the Venerable Sariputta a further question and said, so they're taking the opportunity to keep asking, yeah, but Bhante, what about, not Bhante, because in those days, because Lord Buddha was still alive, bhikkhus would address each other as avuso, even if the other bhikkhu was 40 years their senior in Vasas, they would call each other avuso, means, friend. But on his deathbed, Lord Buddha told them to avoid any complications with most people because people would be offended. And he even thought about that. He said, okay, whoever is senior to someone, even by an hour of vassa, like ordination, and upasampada, I mean, then they need to call that person who's their senior Bhante. While the other one, if he chooses to call the other one who's less in seniority Bhante, that's up to them, but otherwise they would call them avuso. So sometimes in the suttas you will see Bhante maybe here and there, but generally it's avuso. Otherwise, Bhante would always go in reference to Lord Buddha or Bhagavan. Anyhow, understanding the Four Noble Truths. Then the bhikkhus proceeded to ask the Venerable Sariputta a further question and said, but friend, could there be another way of describing a noble disciple other than one who possesses right view, whose view is unmistakably accurate, someone who has in his heart the unshakable and personally verifiable faith and confidence in the Dhamma, the one who has finally attained to the true and genuine Dhamma? Yes, friends, there could be another way of describing a noble disciple. So it's not just having right view, there's different requirements, different ways of identifying a person having right view. And that's why Venerable Sariputta is going into each of these compartments of the Dhamma and pulling out these important frameworks of each. And now we're going to go to the one of the biggest, the Four Noble Truths, and indicate why having that understanding is considered right view as well. Whenever, friends, a noble disciple looks at suffering, he does so carefully as he comes to see and understand it, just like he said in the first paragraph with unskillful behaviors. He said he looks at the unskillful act or behavior as he comes to see and understand it. These two terms are very important. Seeing and understanding. Sometimes it's called Vijja and Vimutti. Sometimes they're called Jnana Dassana. To be able to see and understand what it means to be liberated, released, that requires a depth of comprehension that is direct to you, personal. So it is not like an aha moment only. Somebody giving you something. It is very personal. No one can tell you it. Similarly, he looks at the origin and cause of suffering, which he does carefully. as he comes to see and understand it. Similarly, he looks at the cessation and ending of suffering, which he does so carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. And he looks at the path that leads to the cessation and very ending of suffering, which he does carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. If you notice, these things are not done in a rush manner, which is what today's society is described as. Everyone is in a rush. We're speeding. Even if we're standing still, we are speeding. And by that same token, we want to, because we have this, and where does the speed come in, or come from? What is the root of that desire to keep speeding away, rushing? It comes from tanha, craving, which has ignorance as its own parent. Because ignorance comes in, or willfully ignoring the fact that, what am I doing? Why am I rushing? So long as we are rushing, that's what I'm trying to say. So long as we are pushing and shoving and rushing our way through understanding of Dhamma, we will not come to understand the Dhamma. We will not understand the Four Noble Truths. We will never appreciate dukkha. Somebody who doesn't appreciate and look carefully at dukkha will never, categorically stated, will never come to understand and appreciate samudaya. Will never understand, therefore, and appreciate nirodha. Will not even come close to even seeing, let alone practicing, the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the fourth Noble Truth, the Magga. So you need to really look at dukkha, your dukkha. You need to acknowledge, instead of rushing away, you need to acknowledge it. But what we're doing is we are rushing, we're in a hurry. That's why you go on retreats and you see everybody's rushing to attain to the first jhana or second or fourth, or actually attain nibbana. It's become like a diploma. So many people today go on retreats wanting to attain liberation just like that. Why? Because they're on a tight schedule. Come on. As if Nibbana is supposed to happen on a retreat. That's how it's listed. I mean, that's how it works, right? The Dhamma works like that, right? Well, hold on, excuse me, what happened to your life? The majority part of your life, your existence. That's the university. That's where you're actually getting the opportunity for an education of the Dhamma. But in order for you to really understand, or even come close to understanding dukkha, you need to give it the time of day. And that is called sati. Sati. Look at the neutral things more so than you're eager to look at the highly pronounced, loud experiences of pain or joy. Well, what happened in the between? Majority of it was neutral experiences, bland, but not that colorful. You mean to say life was not happening there? Yeah. That's why many people actually want to stay with passion. That's why anybody who pushes for, oh, I'm a very passionate person, Bhante. I love passion. Okay, stay in dukkha, my friend. Stay there. Skulk in the realm of Mara. That's stupid. That's a person who's ignorant, wanting to attain Nibbana at the same time. They don't work. Try to light turn on the light switch while telling the darkness in the room to not leave. See if you can convince the darkness to not leave. As you turn on the light switch, which has a light bulb that works and there's power coming in. It won't work. Similarly with the Dhamma. So we need to be able to slow things down. Not doing a retreat necessarily, but from you getting up in the, at the kitchen table, getting up, well, a lot happened before you even touch the table, so you can push yourself back with your chair, let's say, to get up, to rise up. Did you notice your hands touching the table? Which part of the hands? And when you're pushing, are your legs or one particular leg pushing more than the other? Is there a sound being, produced because of those actions? And let's hold on a second. What instigated this? Mano sanchetana. It was triggered. There was a desire. There was a need. There was a nutriment, nourishment. That's why we love Mano sanchetana. We love making or having intentions. We love thinking. That's why it's very boring when you somehow end up in upekka. The habitual part of the brain comes in and says, what are we doing next? We have to do something. What is this? Oh, let me have this. Boom, all of a sudden, oop, 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 and all of a sudden the hindrance shows up of restlessness. Uddacha shows up. But it doesn't show up like in Niagara. It starts slowly, boom, 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 because you're leaking. You're not strong enough to withstand and push and close that door on them. Because you don't understand nutriment, how subtle it is. Because deep down, if you go, there is craving behind the Mano Sanchetana, just like there's craving behind wanting to make contact, whether it's contact to an object of the mind, concept, memory, thought, idea, some principle, or relationships, even Dhammic relationships, but it's keeping the mind active. Digging deep and you will find the Anusaya. Ooh, I like this thought. This is my thought. Thank you very much. What? Asmimana much? Conceit am is there, lurking about. Well, how are you going to know this if you're rushing? You can't. That's why we need to seclude ourselves. That's why we need to isolate ourselves, even if it's a small portion of the day. Isolate yourself from your technology around you. Or carry sati, that is your mobile seclusion cell. Wherever you go, sati, if you bring sati there, that is your kuti that you're carrying with you. No one can see it. That's the fun part. You can be in the middle of a very busy building with people typing away on their computers, sending emails, this and that, noise, this and that. If you have sati, you are in full lockdown. Nothing is coming in, the hindrances. And there's only one thing that can arise, and there is wisdom and understanding, seeing, vidya, knowing. In this manner, too, friends, he would be declared a noble disciple, one who is said to possess the right view, whose view is unmistakably accurate, someone who has in his heart the unshakable and personally verifiable faith and confidence in the Dhamma, the one who has finally attained to the true and genuine Dhamma. Excuse me. Now, friends, what is meant by suffering? What is the origin and arising of suffering? What is the ending and cessation of suffering? And what is the path that leads to the cessation and very ending of suffering? Rebirth is suffering. Getting sick is suffering. Aging and getting old is suffering. Death is suffering. Grief, lamentation, pain, depression, and a sense of loss or anguish are all suffering. Associating with whatever is disagreeable or disliked is suffering. Separating from what one likes is suffering. Not getting what one likes is also suffering. In other words, all that the 5 grabbing aggregates try to latch onto is suffering. 5 aggregates. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Material form, feeling, perceptions, memories, habitual tendencies or drives, sankharas, and consciousness or sense awareness. We latch on to them. Why? Because it gives us some existential coherence. To feel that we exist, a part of us exists. Here's an experiment you can try. Imagine everyone you know in your life turns their back on you. Everyone. That means you take your phone and all the contacts in the contact section, everyone you know, I mean really know, suddenly don't want to talk to you. They cut their contact with you. And you go outside, and you so happens to be, basically, you happen to be in a place where you don't know anyone. You just landed in a foreign country. You don't know anyone. Or you lost your phone and there's no access to any technology. So there goes that. How will be your life? After that moment. Because we like to continue. And that continuation occurs because of our desire to grab onto these 5 aggregates. That gives us meaning. That's why when rupa fails, the body is aching and it's falling apart. The legs don't work, this and that. You're on a wheelchair. You're not even identifiable. Maybe you're a burn victim. Or you lost your memory. But okay, form is out the door. What's left? Well, feeling is there. I can still feel pleasure, pain, neutral. We don't like that. Pleasure and pain. What about perception? Yeah, I have memories. Okay, so I can latch on to that. Ask any elderly person, senior citizen, any old person. You'll see sankharas. You'll see vijnana still. Anything, it's like driftwood that we're holding on to in the middle of the ocean. It's a shipwreck, you know. All this is called suffering, friends. And what is the origin and the rising of suffering? Because Venerable Sariputta is still explaining the 4 Noble Truths. By the way, we'll end at the end of this section. We'll resume next week after that. And what is the origin and the rising of suffering? It is this ongoing thirst that leads to repeated rebirth. While one seeks constant excitement and enjoyment, finding delight here and there, that is to say, being constantly thirsty for sensual pleasures, constantly thirsty for re-becoming, and constantly thirsty for non-becoming. Excuse me. These are the different forms of craving, by the way. This then is called the origin and arising of suffering, friends. And what about the ending and cessation of suffering? It is the remainderless fading away and dispassion, cessation, the giving up, the relinquishment, the release and abandoning of that very constant thirst for sensual pleasures. The constant thirst for re-becoming and the constant thirst for non-becoming. This is called the ending and cessation of suffering, friends. So even if you want to have, lights out at the end of a difficult life, I want out. I just don't want to exist anymore. There's nothing noble about it. You're just a nihilist. It's just as bad as somebody wanting to be reborn in the middle of a heavenly harem, right? In the Talatinsa heaven, like we saw some weeks ago. Sakka had built himself a huge mansion with plenty of prostitutes, basically. Divine. What a miserable life. What a terrible, terrible waste of life. Why? Because you're still craving. There's still suffering, albeit the possibility for pain is far less over there, but it's a ticking time bomb. Sooner or later, it might be billions of years, by the way. Sooner or later, it will run out. And you're going to fall on your behind, as they say, into the middle of terrible situations, terrible birth. And it's going to be like a dream, even though it might have been many, many hundreds of millions of years. Too late, too bad, you're not in it. Time's up, gotta go. I might be oversimplifying here or presenting it in a very grotesque manner, but basically that's what it is. We've gone through the heavenly realm so many times we can't even keep track of, if you have the memory. Sometimes I tell students, I wish it would be possible for everyone to see their past lives. It would make it so much easier for everybody. The terror that you would recall from your time in the hell realms. And then the terror that occurred in your heart when you realized as a deva that you're about to fall from that glorious state of a divine being and end up in, I don't know, in the boondocks of Calcutta without food, in a family of 16 kids, and you're being pushed outside by your parents, no school, so that you can go and earn a living. Wait a minute, I was sitting by Sutka over there. What happened? I was enjoying all kinds of sexual pleasures. What is this? What is this body? It smells. What is? Yes. No wonder we can't remember, because it's full of disappointments. But if we could, it would make it so much easier for us to quickly wake up and put the effort to get ourselves off the hook of Mara, of death. Because there's no salvation, there's no freedom by seeking a rebirth in a heavenly realm, even the Brahma realms. We saw a few weeks ago, right, with Baka, the Brahma god, how he was drenched in ignorance. He was being fooled by Mara. I mean, how pathetic is that? You work doing good deeds for countless eons and you end up as a Brahma god only to be fooled by Mara? Are you kidding me? Well, you be a slave to your senses, that's what you will be. Even though you're working under the guise of basically doing kusala kamma, good, wholesome, merit-making actions. That's why Lord Buddha always discouraged his bhikkhus, his students, to merely seek a heavenly birth, or at any point. Prabhu Sayadaw talks about this a lot. He's like, leave all that nonsense behind. Attain freedom. Stick to one object of meditation. Understand anicca, dukkha, anatta. Practice the Noble Eightfold Path. Understand dukkha and cut yourself free from this whole mass of suffering that exists in all of the 31 realms of existence. It's a nightmare to be desiring or ending up in a heavenly realm. It's a nightmare when you think of it in Dhammic terms. A noble disciple will never seek truly a life in a heavenly realm over cutting free totally, because for them, the hell realm or the heavenly realms basically are not so different. Why? Because their understanding is far deeper. And what about the ending and cessation of suffering? It is the remainderless fading away and dispassion, cessation and the giving up and the relinquishment, the release, and I think I read that. This is called the ending and cessation of suffering, friends. And what is the path that leads to the cessation and the very ending of suffering? It is none other than the application and practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. That is, right view, right intentional thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And when, friends, a noble disciple looks at suffering, he does so carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. Similarly, he looks at the origin and cause of suffering, which he does carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. Similarly, he looks at the cessation and ending of suffering, which he does carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. And he looks at the path that leads to the cessation and the very ending of suffering, which he does carefully, as he comes to see and understand it. Then he abandons and lets go of the underlying drive for passion or lust. He removes the underlying drive. Underlying drive, again, here is the reference for anusayas. Latent tendencies, sometimes translated also. Anusaya, for having dislike or resistance, and he completely uproots from his heart the underlying drive for bearing the conceit, I am. Thus, by leaving behind ignorance and gaining true knowledge within himself, he puts an end to suffering here within this very life of his. Again, gaining true knowledge within himself means no one has given that to you, and no one can take that away from you. Lord Buddha could not, even if he wanted to, could not take anyone's realization away from them. Why? Because he never gave it to them in the first place. The person understands, realizes this. Anyone who thinks that their teacher is the one who gives them attainments, and that's why they huddle around such a teacher, despite the abuse and this and that, or despite the fact that they see that there's no Dhamma there. Many people latch on, just like Pancha Upadana Khanda. This time they added another 6th aggregate, and that is the teacher. Like, please don't leave us, don't let, yeah. Why? I've looked at their eyes and I'm looking, as what is the driving force? And I see greed and craving. Why? Because they think, because the teacher said, oh, you're an anagami, oh, you're an arahant, oh, you're a sakadagami, you're sotapanna. If I disagree with the teacher, what does that do to my attainment? This might sound funny, but there are thousands of people like that. Thousands. I know hundreds of them personally. Terrible. That's why we're doing this, so that they could actually hear Lord Buddha's words. Venerable Sariputta's words. They could wake up and not waste another life living like idiots. Thus, by leaving behind ignorance and gaining true knowledge within himself, he puts an end to suffering here within this very life of his. It is in this manner, friends, that a noble disciple is said to possess right view, whose view is unmistakably accurate. Someone who has in his heart the unshakable and personally verifiable faith and confidence in the Dhamma. The one who has finally attained to the true and genuine Dhamma. In listening to these words spoken by the Venerable Sariputta, the fellow bhikkhus became quite delighted, as they exclaimed, Sadhu, friend. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. As we stop here for today, we'll continue from the section entitled Aging and Death, and we see how Venerable Sariputta, as always, beautifully delineates the role of Sammaditi in the proper understanding of aging and death, which is everyone's path. We are guaranteed at least one of them, death part. It's good to have a guarantee, you know, at least that. So I'll pause here and see if there are any questions, comments. I hope you're enjoying Okay, so please be mindful that as I gave the example of some students of the Dhamma or people who practice one form or another, whether it is Dhamma or Adhamma, it's a different story. But what is important to always consider, really, the truth, valuable truth to consider, is that the person might go on living a life and not even come close to tasting true Dhamma. But for all intents and purposes, those gathered around them might tell them, cherry picking the Dhamma, giving them this and that to fit in, almost like a toxic relationship, toxic spouse, toxic husband, or toxic friend, toxic wife, who says certain things strategically in a way to keep you on the hook. And it's crucial for us to look at the role of right view, samadhi. There was a reason why Lord Buddha established that as the very first. You get that correct, the samadhi portion correct of the Noble Eightfold Path, you are set for success. And we're seeing here, it's not just having one particular view. No, it's reflective on several different of the principle frameworks found within the Dhamma. You cannot choose the wrong action if you have the right view. Why? Because right view is like the eyes. If you have eyes, it's like almost the headlights of a car at night. If you have eyes, you will know where you're going. But if you switch off the headlights of the car, you don't know where you're going at night. And there are no lights, unfortunately, around you, street lights. You will slam, you're going to actually fall down a cliff. And that falling down, we can resemble that to living life without Dhamma. Even though you might be living a whole entire life thinking that you're practicing. And that is an unfortunate reality we see all around us. Not one particular group, but throughout the Buddhist world, we see this. I'm not even going to talk about other traditions, other religions. So, it's important for us to bear that in mind, and the role of samadhi in all of these different aspects of our lives. Ultimately, it is all about our practice and our understanding and learning through our interactions with life, consciously, by slowing things down and not rushing. So, if there are no questions, let us conclude by transferring some merits. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumuditva chirang rakhantu lokasasana. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumuditva chirang rakhantu desana. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumuditva chirang rakhantu mampati. May you all be well. May the blessings of the Triple Gem, the Dhamma, of course the Buddha, and the purity of the Sangha, the energy left behind by the Arahants, still strong as the energy left behind, the signature of Lord Buddha's energy is strong. That's why the Dhamma still vibrates with the help of the Devas, many of whom sat at the feet of, or touched the ground with their divine feet in front of Lord Buddha, listened to, heard discourse after discourse, who know the discourses by heart, many of the devas, with their protection also. May you feel yourself strong. May your practice strengthen and find more and more strength every single day, more drive to complete the task. In this life, Titeva Dhamme, be fearless. This is a warrior's path. This is the head of this path. Lord Buddha was known as the unvanquishable conqueror. And the Dhamma he taught is the same. So we have nothing to fear. Slow things down. Be fearless. And go all the way. Stop selling yourself short. And the Dhamma is there to guide you. Sukhi hotu.
When we are mindful, we won't be so forgetful. This statement is not false but true. Let us come and test it too. Ehipasiko means come and see whether it is true. Only then we can accept it and say, oh yes, it's true. When we are mindful, we won't be so forgetful. This statement is not false but true. Let us come and test it too. Ehipasiko means come and see whether it is true. Only then we can accept it and say, oh yes, it's true. And say, oh yes, it's true. May I show loving kindness to all living beings. May I have no anger or hatred. To my parents, to my teachers, to my relatives, to my friends, may I have compassion to all. May I show loving kindness to all living beings. May I have no anger or hatred. To my parents, to my teachers, to my relatives, to my friends, may I have compassion to all. May I have compassion to all. May all beings be well and happy. May they be free from suffering. May all beings be well and happy. May they find love and peace. Well and happy, well and happy, well and happy, well and happy, 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 well and happy, well and happy. May they find love and peace. May all beings be well and happy. May they be free from suffering. May all beings be well and happy. May they find love and peace. Well and happy, well and happy, well and happy, well and happy, 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 well and happy, well and happy. May they find love and peace. May they find love and peace.
The Dhammapada is a regular and weekly presentation by Bhante Sivali. He has already presented over 60 verses with brief sermon on each verse on Buddha Dhamma TV. Now, here is Bhante Sivali to present the verse number 65.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Welcome to the Buddha Dharma TV. This is the Dhamma Pada program. Today we are going to discuss the verse number 65. Once Buddha was in the Jetavana monastery. At that time, someone reported about an incident about 30 monks who became victims of a group of prostitutes. At that time, the Buddha advised them, this is not the first time that this incident happened. Even in the previous existence, the very same 30 friends, they have done the same thing. And this is, again, it's happening. And this was very well reported in the Thundada Jataka story, because the monk who was associated in this discussion, his name was Thundila. So it is very well reported in the Thundila Jatak dates. It says, Mutampi che vinyo panditam pairupasati. Khippam dhammam vijanati jiva super rasam yatha. This is a nice example. If a wise person were to associate with a wise person, even for one moment, he will quickly understand the teachings. This is very much like the tongue being able to discern the subtle flavors of soup. This stanza could be further appreciated when you contrast it with the previous one, which number 64, which we preached last week. In the previous one, the image used is the spoon, Dabbi Roop Super Rasanyata. Though it serves tasty food, that means Dabbi, the spoon, though it serves tasty food endlessly, again and again, always, it just cannot appreciate how food tastes. Very much like a foolish individual or unmatured person, being unable to appreciate the teaching, even when he keeps company with the wise. An intelligent man, even though he is associated with the wise man only for a moment, quickly understands the Dhamma, just as the tongue knows the taste of the soup. Not the spoon, Dabbi, spoon, not the spoon, but the tongue knows the taste of the soup. Jiva super rasamyata. Jiva means tongue in Pali language. Like the tongue knows the flavor of food. The image of food flavor is continued here as well. Food flavor is a universal human experience. Everybody likes foods. Everybody likes food. Therefore, an image that is associated with the taste of food can be appreciated universally. So Buddha's example here is a very nice one. In this stanza, the Buddha compares the wise person to the tongue. The tongue keeps the company of much food, but with mindfully or with alacrity, it can discuss various flavors. In total contrast to the spoon that does not know how the food tastes. In spite of the fact that it spends its whole lifetime in food, just like the tongue, the wise person knows the flavor of the virtuous person the instant that comes into contact with one. Here the word vinyu, one who possesses, vinyayu, cognition. Here vinyu or vinyan implies intelligence. The deep side of this verse is that vinyu, one who possesses, vijnana, or the consciousness or cognition. Here, vijnana implies intelligence. So, cognition is one of the 5 aggregates, one of the 4 nutriments, the third link of the dependent origination, the 5th in a 6-fold division of elements, viewed as one of the 5 groups. It is inseparably linked with the 3 other mental groups of object, while the other 3 contribute more specific functions. Its ethical and karmic character and its greater or lesser degree of intensity and clarity are chiefly determined by the mental formations associated with it. Just as the other group of existence, consciousness is a flux and does not constitute an abiding mind substance, nor is it a transmigrating entity or soul. The 3 characteristics, impermanence, suffering, and not self, are frequently applied to it in the texts. The Buddha often stressed that apart from conditions, there is no arising of consciousness. And all these statements about its nature hold good for the entire range of consciousness, be it past, future, or presently arising, gross or subtle, in oneself or external, inferior or lofty, far or near. According to the 6 senses, it divides into 6 kinds, like eye or visual consciousness, etc. About the dependent arising of these 6 kinds of consciousness, conditioned through the eye, the visible object, light and attention, the eye consciousness arises. So you see, conditioned through the eye, the visible object, light and attention, eye consciousness arises. The Buddha said that chakkuncha paticca rupecha uppajjati chakku vijnana. So eye consciousness, how it arises. Chakkuncha paticca rupecha uppajjati chakku vijnana. So conditioned through the eye, the visible object, light and attention, eye consciousness arises. Conditioned through the ear, the audible object, the ear passage and attention, ear consciousness arises. Conditioned through the nose, the olfactory object, air and attention, nose consciousness arises. Conditioned through the tongue, the gastric object, or through the body, bodily impression, the earth element and attention, body consciousness arises. Conditioned through the subconscious mind, the mind object and attention, mind consciousness arises. So the Abhidhamma literature distinguishes 89 classes of consciousness, being either karmically wholesome, unwholesome, or neutral, and belonging either to the sense sphere, the fine material, or the immaterial sphere, or supramundane consciousness. Supramundane consciousness. So these things, of course, little bit hard to understand. But if we give due attention and try to understand these things, how these things happens, how the eye consciousness happen, how the body consciousness happen, and all this ear consciousness arises like this. All these things, if you know, if you try to understand, if you try to pay attention, and slowly and surely try to grasp the deep meaning of these things, and try to see things and feel it, then we slowly begin to understand that the normal functioning of these things and the reality, and nothing called soul. This will help us a lot to understand the true nature of our life. So it is good to understand these things, good to try to read and listen to these things again and again, and slowly understand. Then you will never fail. You will be able to understand this, but slowly and surely, gradually. May you all be well and happy.
When we are mindful, we won't be so forgetful. This statement is not false but true. Let us come and test it too. Ehipassiko means come and see whether it is true. Only then we can accept it and say, oh yes, it's true. When we are mindful, we won't be so forgetful. This statement is not false but true. Let us come and test it too. Ehipassiko means come and see whether it is true. Only then we can accept it and say, oh yes, it's true. And say, oh yes, it's true. May I show
Well, that ends today's program. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact us at info@buddhadharmatv.com. We work hard to share the noble, peaceful, and sublime teachings of Buddha with you, and helping you pursue the spiritual path under his wisdom. Please encourage and support those interested in the rational and enlightened teachings of the Buddha. Thank you for watching the Buddha Dhamma TV. Good night. Namo Buddhaya.